You get respect by being secure in who you are. You don't get it from just accumulating a bunch of like resume bullets. You get respect by being true to who you are and having unwavering confidence when you enter a room. The people who you feel most connected to or who make the biggest impact on your life are the ones who are unapologetic about their past, unapologetic about who they are, and unapologetic about what they want. And I guarantee you're gonna feel so much more peace when you're being honest with yourself about who you are and how you're showing up. And so here's the framework that I think we should be using when we're thinking about this. Hello everyone, and welcome back to Too Smart for This. It's your host, me, Alexis Barber. How are we? I'm so excited. This is actually the last week of summer for me. I start school next week, which is absolutely wild and exciting and also nerve-wracking. But I just had a really great weekend because I went to Every Stylish Girl Sip and Slay in New York on Saturday, and I met so many of you guys who are listeners of the show. The majority of people I ran into who decided to say hi or who recognized me were like, I love your podcast, I love your podcast. And that, for me, was literally so heartwarming and exciting because I was like, oh my God, like, this isn't something that you can like see the likes or the comments on all the time. So I sort of forget that there's like low-key thousands of people listening to it every week. Oh my God, that just made me nauseous to think about. But it was really heartwarming to me, especially because I think you guys can tell the show is, and my long form content, like my YouTube vlogs and stuff, that's where I feel the most myself and the most honest and the most like real, you know what I mean? Whereas a lot of other places on the internet, it's just like wasn't really vibing with me for a little bit. I'm not saying never, but just for a while it hasn't been. And so it's also, there's more context in podcasting. You can understand more because there's more time to digest it. And for me personally, I love podcasts as my preferred form of like ingesting media. So that's why I love this show so much and why I'm so happy you guys do too, which is why I'm really excited for today's ep where we get to chit chat. Okay, so the first order of business before we jump into today's content is that we have switched over to Substack as our provider for the podcast. So what this means for you is, one, there's not going to be those like random ads that pop up in the show anymore, which is really nice because I was trying that out as like a distribution channel for the show, and like it worked in some ways, but it disrupts the listening experience in a way I'm not obsessed with. And two, it means that if you subscribe to the Substack, you'll get the podcast along with some fun little goodies in your inbox every week. So I'll be sending out journal prompts or some sort of extra content with the show every week in your inbox on Thursday mornings. So if you subscribe, it will really help us grow the show, but it will also give you some extra content so that once you listen to this, you can then ingest it and apply it to your life with either journal prompts, sometimes a Notion template, or, you know, extra content in a way that's really going to help you alchemize it and apply it to your life. So starting there, we're switching to Substack, and we were also going to be introducing a paid version of the Substack as well, where for $5 a month, you will get an extra episode of the show that's an unfiltered Q&A. So I'm kind of calling it like my close friends Q&A, like as if you were on my close friends is how I'm going to be answering this type of stuff. So we'll have the close friends Q&A. It'll cover everything from career to dating to relationship details. And then there'll be a second episode every month as well. That'll either be extra content from our amazing guests that we have lined up for this fall on the show, or it'll be another sort of like episode where I'm just chatting about how I feel about current trends, what's going on, blah, blah, blah. And then the final thing that will come in this paid version is what I've been learning in business school. And this will be a monthly newsletter where I will compile everything I'm learning from my classes, all the readings that I found most interesting, and the greatest takeaways from what I'm getting at Wharton. And this is just like something fun for me because I feel like I learn so much here, but then I don't always, take it in and really digest it and am able to share it with people. And I also feel like it's important for me to be able to share this knowledge, because going to this school is a privilege and it's such an expensive education that I want to make sure I'm making the most of it while also sharing it with you guys. So to subscribe to the paid version of the Substack, the link will be in the show notes, and those are the 3 things you'll get: unfiltered Q&A episode, extra content from our guests or from me just shooting the shit, talking shit, and a monthly What I Learned at Wharton, which will give you exclusive readings, exclusive readings, that sounds like an astrology reading, lol, exclusive content about what I'm learning in this $200,000 degree. So if any of that interests you, please make sure to subscribe below. Now that we're not doing those ads through that other platform and that we're doing it just through Substack, this is an independent podcast. This is something I pay for myself to produce every single week, and that's expensive. I hope you guys realize it's a little expensive, and if we're not doing ads, then we need to make sure that we're financing it in other ways, which is why the paid Substack, which I think will bring you some amazing content that I can't wait to produce, is really the way to help the show. And if you can't help in that way, please make sure you are leaving a rating and review on the show, because that also really helps us grow, and that you're sharing it with friends who you might find it interesting. There was 2 girls I ran into at Every Stylish Girl, and one was like, "Oh my gosh, it's so nice to meet you. This is my friend who introduced me to your show." And I was like, "Oh my God, this is so cute." So that is the housekeeping for today. We are on Substack now. Please subscribe. And yeah, let's get into the app. So it's the last week of summer, and that's really got me thinking about where I was this time last year, because this week last year is the week my relationship ended. I had COVID at school, which was terrible, and I was missing part of preterm, and also mentally and confidence-wise, I was nowhere near where I am now. The way I went into last year was very much of the mindset of anything could happen, let's try it all out, let's do everything, and then second year we'll be more, specific about what we want, And when I said that's what I wanted, the universe delivered, because my relationship of 6 years ended. I got way more opportunities with influencing and with content creation and with my book deal, and with 2 Collective that I could ever imagine. Like, I did not go into August of last year thinking that I was going to become a published author and have a major product deal with Selena Gomez. Like, I didn't think any of that was going to happen last year. And in fact, I couldn't really believe that it would, because I was lacking a little bit of confidence. And when I say a little bit, I mean a lot. And what I've recognized is in the past year, I've become more confident, not just because I've overcome and gone through and done a ton of stuff that I wanted to do, but also because I've become more myself. And this is something that I am just piecing together on my own, because I've shifted my identity a lot in the last year to become someone who is more sure of themselves and someone who is more confident. And a lot of that I used to think would have to happen because I was doing more, or because I was getting more accolades, or because I was presenting to a certain type of person or accepted into some type of group. And I've recognized that the reason I'm confident is not because of the things that I've accomplished, but rather it's because I'm more comfortable with who I am. And that's not something that we often talk about when we are discussing confidence, because we're like, show up as a certain person and you whatever. And like, it just doesn't feel like that's the real key to confidence, because there's also lots of conflicting narratives about how we're supposed to show up and what we're supposed to look like and do in order to be successful. So it can become really confusing when you're like, I want to be myself, but I also want to be successful, but I also want to fit in. And those 3 things don't always allow for you to feel like you're really being yourself, which is what real confidence is. So why does confidence actually even matter? Like, why am I even talking about this? I honestly hate the word confidence, and I feel like it's like kind of overplayed, and it just kind of sounds like I'm giving you this little girl boss behavior life discussion. And honestly, that's not how I want this to feel. Like, I want you to think about this as security, because if we're thinking about it, confidence is actually peace and security and feeling safe in your own body and in your own skin. So when we're thinking about cultivating it, you're not just thinking about showing up to the world, like being the coolest, smartest, prettiest girl in the room. It's actually about feeling a sense of psychological safety within yourself. And psychological safety is like this HR word that gets thrown around a lot. Like at Google, we were talking about it all the time, like creating psychologically safe teams and making sure everybody feels welcome and able to be themselves on the team. And let me just tell you something, in a corporate environment, you gotta be very careful with how you show up. You gotta be very careful with it, okay? But you need to feel psychological safety within yourself and confidence within yourself in order to not feel that nagging pain of anxiety every single day. And that anxiety is actually coming from not being true to yourself. It's not coming from something you could do to change it. It's actually coming because you're not really allowing yourself to show up in the way that you're meant to. It's like when you're nervous to talk to a stranger, it's because you don't know that stranger, you don't know how they're going to receive you, you don't know if they're interested in what you have to say. Whereas when you text your besties, you know that like they're down for it, you know they're going to laugh, you know that they are going to find whatever you're saying interesting, or you know they care about you, so you know you can show up. Because you've built that psychological safety and that trust with them to show up authentically, even if you're making a mistake and you're coming to them for support, even if you are doing something that you know isn't good for you, you can go to them and you can get their support. And you know that they'll be there for you if you need them to be. And so when I'm thinking about confidence, I'm thinking about becoming your own best friend internally, where you know you can go to yourself and you'll get either the tough love you're looking for, or maybe it's the support you're looking for, or it's the reality like check that you are looking for and that you need. You know you can get that from yourself just as much as you can rely on it from the person in your life that is your biggest support system externally as well. And so when our confidence is constantly being encroached upon, which if you're a woman and if you're a woman of color, which I believe the majority of this audience is, that's happening all the time, okay? People really do try to tear us down. I mean, I told you guys in my last solo ep about like someone trying to get me expelled from school. Like that's not happening because I'm a bad person. Like that's happening because someone else is trying to encroach upon my confidence and my safety and my security. So when we do develop confidence and have this psychological safety within ourselves, that's a radical act, especially if you're a woman, especially if you're a person of color, because when you can do that and not let a world that's literally been built on destroying you destroy you, there's a sense of strength that comes from that. And that's also something that is inspiring millions of people and creating worlds where more people can do that because you are doing it. But as we go from child to adult, as we grow up, our sense of confidence comes from different places. It originally, when you're like in elementary school, I feel like it comes from like having friends at school, or sitting at the right lunch table, or having the right shoes to fit in with everybody else, and like having your little friend group at school. That's where you start to get some of your confidence. Or maybe it's getting good grades in school and getting your parents to tell you you did a good job, or it's getting a gold star. And as you evolve into maybe young adolescence or high school, those groups become even more important. But an additional thing gets brought in, which is your appearance and how do you look and how do you fit in, and how smart are you? Are you going to the right schools? Are you getting the best grades? What's your SAT score? And so all of these other external factors start to be something that we start to pull our confidence from. And as women, a lot of times we're pulling this from our appearance. So those girls who spend so much time on looking really good, or spending so much money on their appearance, or making sure they are thin or whatever, we get our confidence from that because we see that our values reflected by how we look. Or there are people who are really concerned about being in the right friend group, and those are like the social climbers around you, and you're like, why do they care so much about this? But you see that like that's where they derive their confidence from, is by hanging out with the quote unquote right people. Or a big one is men. Like a lot of girls, you know, those crazy girls who think they're better than you because they have a C-list athlete boyfriend of some sort who cheats on them regularly, but because they have a man, they're better than you and they feel better and they feel confident. And wherever you're getting your confidence from, if you're getting it from anything that's outside of you, it's not real. Because it's only inside of you. Because if you're getting your confidence from your boyfriend because he has a nice job, what happens when he loses it? Your confidence is gone. Now what? And now what? What happens when your beauty starts to fade as you get older? Now what? Like, if what happens when your career, you decide you wake up one day and you don't love it anymore? It's where's your confidence now? It has to come from within. And I hate when people say that. It's like sounds really like played out and tired, but in reality, you're building a sense of safety and security within yourself. And I think you can fake confidence really easily. You can fake confidence whenever you want. And that's something I did to first build my confidence. I remember when I was like younger, I was watching Gossip Girl, and I thought that like confidence was being like a Blair Waldorf kind of like mean girl at school. And I remember being like mean girl or being like talk shit or like just like admitting you aren't the nicest person in the world was like empowering for me. And I went to summer camp, and at my summer camp, we had obviously all these values at summer camp of being nice girls and like not having conflict. But I introduced the idea of this like kind of mean girls group. And it wasn't necessarily called that. I can't tell you what it was called because it'll reveal too much about my summer camp. But basically, while I was there, I introduced this little society of like girls who were bitches. And you had to be like kind of mean if you wanted to join it. And that's because at the time I felt like being mean was being honest. And I'm just giggling at myself for this because it continued for many years after I left that summer camp. But basically, I felt like being mean was being honest, and I made that the personality, and thereby I was able to establish a group, become the leader of a group, and establish that little like dominance or whatever in that world, just like a Blair Waldorf would. But Blair Waldorf, we all know, didn't have true confidence, and me being mean, or nobody was actively being mean, but we were just saying we were mean, you know what I mean? Like when you're like a child or whatever. And when you're in that world and that's what you are like saying is your identity, and it's not really true, because in my core, in my heart, I'm a nice person, I'm a kind person. Like, I'm judgmental, but if you're doing you, I want you to do you, and that makes me happy, and I love to watch it. If you like it, I love it. As long as you admit you like it, I love it. You know what I mean? The most embarrassing thing in the world is being embarrassed. And that's not something that I ascribe to. And I feel like the reason that identity of being a mean girl did not really work for me is because it wasn't true to my soul. And what's true to your soul is actually what ends up building your confidence long term anyway, as long as you are brave enough to admit what's honest and what truly is moving the needle for you and making you happy. And when you are confident and you feel safe in your own body and you feel like, you know, what you're orienting towards and who you're surrounding yourself with, how you're showing up for yourself is true and from a very honest place, you're more likely to show up consistently for your goals. You're more likely to have fulfilling relationships because you're not putting up with BS from people that you're just hanging around because you feel like you have to. And you are able to let go of what doesn't work for you a lot faster because you know what does and you know what is fulfilling you. And you are in turn able to get where you want to go more easily, and you don't feel as drained every single day when you are facing a career you might not like, or in a relationship that doesn't fulfill you, or with friends that are constantly sucking the life out of you. Nobody wants to feel that way, and I think a lot of us don't realize that we don't have to. You don't have to be friends with someone you don't like. You don't have to be in a relationship that doesn't serve you, but true confidence is going to come from a place of admitting to yourself what you need, admitting to yourself what you want, and acting on that. And this comes from being more yourself, not more of XYZ that is external. It's not going to come from accomplishing the next thing. It's not going to come from having a boyfriend that's great on paper. And it's not going to come from being in the, quote, right friend group. It's going to come when you feel at peace with yourself and that you can walk into a room as yourself. And whether the people in there like you or not, you are happy. It's not about if you walk in the room and everybody likes you. That's where your confidence, it can't come from there. So, since many of us have covered up this light of what's inside of us to appeal to other people, becoming confident actually means uncovering what those layers have been. And this is why you have to go through an identity shift. And this identity shift can come at you in a couple of different ways, okay? And this can start with being baptized by fire, which is kind of what happened to me last year when I had no real intentions for how I was going to spend the year. But I was like, I knew in my head what I wanted. Like I had intentions for what I wanted my life to look like. It happened really fast. And I was sort of like overwhelmed the whole time. I never woke up a day in the last year where I felt like I got this. But I did shit anyway. And I think confidence may have come from there. But that's all to say that if you have an idea of what you want and you're saying to the universe, I want to be this like successful career woman, it's going to throw you challenges and opportunities for you to become that. And that's what happened to me this past year. And so I made that identity shift really sort of haphazardly and in a crazy way, but I still made it. And so what I want this episode to sort of talk to you about is making an identity shift that's way more intentional and way more effective because it's more intentional. And throughout this summer, I've been super stressed about this next year. Like, I've been dreading school starting next week. I've been anxious about it because I've been like, how am I going to do everything I want to do and be the person I want to be and show up how I want to show up? Because like, oh my God, there's so much to do. I want to do it all right now. I don't know why it's all happening. Like, how am I going to do this with classes? And then while I was moping about this in the shower a couple of days ago, I said to myself, hold on. What would it look like if I could do it all? What support do I need to create for myself in order to be that person that I say that I want to be? And this is why so many of those like self-help-y type of things ask you to create the best version of yourself in your head and think about what that person wears every day, how that person eats every day, what they do, what their routine, and visualize that higher self, because doing that is really how you create a new identity and how you step into that identity. But I think sometimes that language can be really confusing because it's like new identity, best self, higher self. All of these selves are just you. It's just you. Think of yourself on like on a timeline, and there's a higher self, there's a better self of you in that timeline, and you're just catching up to her because you know how to get there. Because if you think of yourself a year from now, if she has, let's think of it in the context of like getting a managerial promotion at work. If you're a manager at your job, say a year from now, and that's like what you really want to do, managing people is a passion of yours. When you wake up at 6 a.m. and go work out and you clock into work and managing someone is important to you, how are you showing up as a manager versus showing up as an individual contributor right now? Are you supporting other people? Are you consistent with the way that you are communicating what you're working on at work? Are you building connections and bringing other people up with you? Are you making sure that you're delivering and taking feedback in a way that's going to be generative for this company as well as that person's performance as well as your own performance? The person who's a manager has a different identity because they are doing things that are different from the person who is an individual contributor. And so if you want to change anything in your life, whether it's becoming someone who does CrossFit or becoming someone who does Pilates or you're becoming someone who's running a half marathon, there's an identity shift you have to make because that person does things that are different than what you do today. But that doesn't mean that that person is a different higher self, best self version of you. It just means they're an evolved one. And it just means there's someone who has that identity. So if you want to become someone who works out all the time, you want to become someone who's really into health and wellness, then you need to ask yourself, what does a person who does that do every day? And this is not a new topic. This is something that's been discussed in books like Atomic Habits, where the best way to change a habit is to make an identity shift and to be someone who shows up in a way that you want to show up as. But what we fail to realize sometimes is that person is already within us. If you see a characteristic in someone else, or if you have a desire for something, that is not just given to you. You think you just fell out of a coconut tree. No, it doesn't just fall out of a coconut tree. It is something that has been placed on your heart and placed on your desires for a reason. It's not literally like random. Like if you want to be a better communicator, it's because you need to be communicating with more people, and that's a part of your journey and your path that is important for you to fulfill. So you have the skills within you, or you have the opportunity to gain those skills within you because they are part of your destiny. If you have a desire, if you have an interest in something, it's part of your destiny. And it's your job to respect that desire by fulfilling it, by asking yourself how you can show up that way. The characteristics, the goals, and the identity that you want to achieve or embody are already yours. Embodying these things is naturally part of your experience. Like, you getting to the next level is inevitable and is going to happen. And you have to believe that in yourself. So when you see that you want to show up a little differently or you want to be something, that's because you're meant to. So shifting these identities requires us to be clear on what we want right now. And I want to caveat that. It doesn't have to be forever. You don't have to be someone who does Pilates forever in order to embody someone who's doing Pilates right now. Like, for example, this next year of my life in business school, I want to be a great student. And that means that I'm being a great student right now. That doesn't mean that I have to embody what it means to be a great student when I graduate or over the summer. You know what I mean? So if you want to make more friends right now, that means you might have to be more extroverted right now. But you might be like me in a phase where it's like you're having trouble maintaining the relationships you have. So being extroverted and meeting new people, that's not really high on my priorities list. Simultaneously, if there are characteristics that you feel like aren't aligned with you anymore or that you don't like, most of the time, whatever issue or big problem you're having in your life, those characteristics or situations you don't like will be reflected back to you. You will face tension with things that are not meant for you because they are not meant for you. For example, I was in this terrible situationship with a guy who was like, I noticed like what I didn't like about him in a lot of ways was that he was kind of lazy. And I saw that in myself and it made me not want to be lazy anymore. And if you're having that experience at work where you're not liking how things are because they're not structured, maybe that's an invitation for you to take a step and look at yourself and say, am I showing up with the level of structure that I believe that this should have? You've got to embody what you feel like you're missing in your life. So when you shift your identity to be more yourself, you aren't lying to yourself anymore. Like I said, the reason that the little mean girl society I started in summer camp when I was like 12 years old didn't work is because I wasn't truly a mean girl. And as I've gotten older and all of my accolades were what was fueling my confidence for up until probably like college and after college, the reason that wasn't working is because I wasn't being true to myself. Things really work when you're in alignment and when you're in a flow with who you are. But where we get stuck is we forget that who we are, we already know them. And all we have to do is see through our desires that those desires are helping us become that person. So we have to respect those desires by showing up for them. And that requires making this sort of identity shift. And a way you can do this is through that embodiment. Like how I was observing Blair Waldorf and trying to show up like her, I was doing it in the wrong ways, but it was still what was helping me step into that and that, dominating force that I wanted to be at that time. And now when I'm looking at my future and how I want to show up, I used to not be able to define myself as an entrepreneur and an influencer. Those used to be hard for me to admit, especially when I got to school a year ago, because I wasn't confident in them because I didn't think other people would receive them in the way I wanted them to. But I had to take a step back and remember, I'm doing this because I love it and I want to do it and it's working for me. So it shouldn't matter what other people think because as long as I'm confident in it, I will have the respect that I am searching so desperately for. You get respect by being secure in who you are. You don't get it from just accumulating a bunch of like resume bullets. You get respect by being true to who you are and having unwavering confidence when you enter a room. Because it doesn't matter how you got to where you are or whatever, if it doesn't fit this perfect idea of how things are supposed to be, like who cares about that? The people who you feel most connected to or confident or who make the biggest impact on your life are the ones who are unapologetic about their past, unapologetic about who they are, and unapologetic about what they want. And that's truly for me my biggest driver now is how authentic, how vulnerable, how real can I be? Because I don't feel this need anymore to show up as someone who's getting it all done or whatever, like, or getting all these accolades. Like, I feel what's more important to me is feeling fulfilled and honest about who I am and honest about how I can help others. And I guarantee you're going to feel so much more peace when you're being honest with yourself about who you are and how you're showing up. And so here's the framework that I think we should be using when we're thinking about this. 1, identify who you've been being and how you've been showing up just by looking at what you did yesterday. And so maybe make a list on one side, say, I am a person who does XYZ, and put that XYZ should be the things that you want to be defined as. I'm healthy. I'm someone who shows up at work consistently. I'm a really good big sister. I'm a really good friend. And define what all of that means to you, and then look at the past week of your life and ask yourself if you've really been showing up in that way or if you haven't. Then identify how you would want people to describe you when they talk about you. So I want people to say, oh, she's a really intelligent, cool, smart person who does this, this, or this, and make it specific and say, this is how I want people to talk about me when I'm not in the room. And then figure out how that person would have to act in order for that to be true about them. So if you want people to say she's the nicest person in the world, would the nicest person in the world be someone who's gossiping all the time and talking shit about somebody? No, they wouldn't. And if you've been doing that every day this week, why would you think people would describe you in a way that you haven't been acting like? And then from that point, ask yourself what type of environment and what type of behaviors are you going to need to embody in order to be that person and have those characteristics that are true to your own desires. And so if you don't care if people describe you as nice or not, throw that out the window, okay? Focus on being someone who's consistent. And that is something that a lot of us could really work on, myself included. Something, for example, that I really want to work on is answering people more on, like, in a more timely manner. I really struggle to answer messages. I really struggle to connect with people and maintain my friendships. And if I want to be someone who does that, I need to create more time in my day to specifically sit down and answer my texts and my emails. And then I get to say I'm someone who answers people in a timely manner. I'm someone who always gets to the bottom of their inbox. And that is now creating a sense of pride for me where I'm like, I know I'm that person, and that gives me that confidence because I know that it's something that I want it to be. It's something I admire in other people, and it's something that I am now someone who does. And so from there, what I like to do is to sort of create that mantra statement of I'm someone who answers people consistently. And if once that gives you a little like, yeah, like I'm proud of myself for doing something like that. Once that happens, then you're like, yeah, it's ready. It's time for me. And when you're faced with answering a text or not answering a text or answering emails or not answering emails, you're going to say to yourself, oh no, like I'm a person who gets to inbox zero by the end of the day. Like it's just who I am. Like I just get it done. And then you start acting like that a little bit more consistently. And now you feel more confident, not because you are doing something for the sake of other people, but because it was something that was important to you and on your spirit. And now you're embodying it. And the best way to embody it is to ask, what environment do I need to create for myself to show up as the person that I authentically want to become? And so you can do this with any goal, whether if it's becoming someone who works out consistently, becoming someone who drinks less coffee, or becoming someone who throws the best parties when you're an introvert. These are all things that if they're on your spirit and if you feel in your heart that you want them, they're already yours. You just have to step into that part of you that is doing that. And another small tip for doing this is to look at your friends in your life and ask yourself who has the characteristics that you want when it comes to embodying like whatever that is, or even like the characters or the influencers or the people you follow. You're like, I really like that she's consistent and that she does this. Like I'm thinking about her and I want to embody that behavior when I am building this new routine or this new environment that I'm trying to create for myself. And so the point of this is to, I hope for you, recognize that confidence, it comes from within because it's already in you and you're not trying to be this new version or a higher version of yourself. That version of you already exists within you, and all you have to do is make the shift and create the environment for you to thrive by asking yourself, what would it look like if I could do this? And that's why when I was moping around in the shower last week thinking, oh my God, how am I going to do this? I shifted it to, what if this could work? What if I could get all this done? What environment would that look like? And that's now an exciting question for me to ask. That's now something that's inspiring for me to think about rather than something that's going to freak me out and make me not want to do anything anymore. So that's my take on confidence and using your identity shifters in order to become more confident. I hope this all made sense and I hope that it was helpful for you guys. Confidence and being yourself and being your authentic self is something everybody struggles with. You're not alone in that whatsoever, but it's also something that is way easier than it looks sometimes when you just don't let it be hard. Ask yourself, how can I do this? And remember that like you've done way harder stuff. You learned how to walk, you learned how to talk, you survived so much. You've survived so much. You've overcome so much. You've made change in your life. And the great thing about change is that once you've made it before, you can make it again. And I'm proud of you. So with that being said, thank you guys so much for listening. And don't forget, you're too smart to not love yourself. And I'll see you next week. Don't forget to subscribe.